Everyone, I wanted to make a video discussing my final thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI, little review on its final DLC, the Rising Tide. I'm also quite aware that Koji Fox was hinting something quite interesting on this game, which he says sarcastically that this is the quote-unquote final DLC, which may hint that the team may be up to something with FF16, but for the sake of this video, we'll just call the Rising Tide as the final DLC. I also want to note that I will be discussing certain spoilers. So with all that being said, where should I begin? My opinions on the game after completing the Rising Tide hasn't changed much. If you want more context, I do have a few videos discussing how I still feel up to this point, but the thing about going back to FF16 is that I got reminded how beautiful the game is and how fun the combat can be once things start to click. I did have a rough start playing the DLC since I was experimenting with the different loadouts, and by the way, ACBU3 has provided so many life quality updates to this game, which also include icon loadouts, so you're able to have a variety of different icon sets without changing your favorite ones, which is so useful for this game, especially when you could get tired of your current icon combo set or need to change your playstyle against different enemies or bosses. They included two new icons that you are able to use in the game, which is Leviathan and Ultima. Ultima is the secret icon to unlock once you play Kiros Gate, which is a whole different game mode, which I'll talk about later. With Leviathan, you have this icon ability called Leviathan's Arm, which allows you to have a completely different gameplay style compared to the rest. You have pretty much a ranged playstyle since Leviathan's Arm shoots out water projectiles at the enemies. There are some mechanics as well, such as perfect reloading, because just like any firearm with ammo, eventually you would need to reload. Leviathan's Arm does the same, but when you execute your perfect reload for a short period of time, you will have unlimited ammo. This playstyle really reminds me of Monster Hunter. In any Monster Hunter game that involves the bowguns, there is patience and strategic approach when utilizing within battle, which the Leviathan Arm does in a similar manner. It's not an icon ability where you can go guns blazing. There is still a tactical element on positioning against mobs and bosses. It's such a solid playstyle to have in your arsenal. It's just unfortunate new players wouldn't be able to unlock Leviathan until Act 3 of the game, which will take hours to go through. Regardless, it is a nice touch since you are able to fully use it in other game modes, which is what I wanted to talk about the most. The Arete Stone has different game modes that give good replay value for FF16, and with the recent DLC expansion, they added another new mode which is called Kiros Gate. It is one of the most challenging game modes to be on other than playing Ultimaniac difficulty in the arcade mode. I would describe Kiros Gate as somewhat of a roguelike since there are elements of temporary upgrades on your set run as you go to each level, while having improvisation in your combat as you progress and have no clue on what to expect for what type of enemies will be on your run. The catch with Kiros Gate is that if you ever want to complete it, you would have to beat it all in one run, which is really tough to do if you don't react to these enemies properly. Also, there are many levels to complete. They showcase about 5 circles, which each circle has about 5 levels total, so approximately 25 levels to complete. I did not fully complete my run just yet, but I did have fun experiencing this because it made me much more tactical on my upgrades and what set builds I should have for my run. I also did hear that there is a secret boss at the end or whenever you complete it, so there is incentive to play this game mode. Also, they do give out rewards, things like gear for your new icon abilities. I also forgot to mention that during your playthrough for Kiros Gate, you do get a new icon ability from Ultima himself, which grants you some of his abilities. It is very fun all around, and you can pretty much build around it with any set. I'm not going to go fully in depth about this icon since it is something I'm not as experienced with. To give a short summary of what it can do, Ultima's icon's specialty does physical damage with its wings. It does big sweeps, which can help you crowd control against mobs, and you're able to use its wings while comboing in the air as well. You could also shoot projectiles with it as the icon's special is activated, and you could do powerful precision counters after precision dodging, whether it is a ranged attack or physical attack. Ultima's abilities are pretty good. I wouldn't say it's completely broken, but I could see people being very optimal with its set if used right. With all that being said, I was criticizing the previous DLC, Echoes of the Fallen, for not giving us an Omega icon set to use for Clive, and also how it was incredibly short DLC to experience. I do understand that the price of the DLC was cheap, The price was $10 and is expected for the DLC to be short, but compared to Resident Evil 4 Remake's DLC Separate Ways, which was the same price that came out nearly at the same time as FF16's first DLC and is similar to its content, which has chunks of story and new gameplay to experience, Resident Evil 4 Remake is more satisfying to experience with what they provided. Echoes of the Fallen was literally 2 hours of content or maybe less, while Resident Evil 4 Remake's DLC takes about 5 hours for an average player while providing much replay value to its DLC. At least with the Rising Tide expansion, there is about 4 to 5 hours to complete the main story, and there is an epilogue to go through which takes about 30 minutes or so that wraps up the DLC story. I did sort of expect the DLC to be longer. It was said that the DLC was approximately 10 hours to finish, but as someone who played Final Fantasy mode for Rising Tide, it took me about 6 hours to finish. I will admit that I was bummed out once the DLC was done and had nothing much to do in the new map once all the quests were finished. I was really in love with how things were done in this expansion, to its setting, to how the gameplay mechanics and difficulty push you to play better, and how replay value for the Aretha Stone, by them adding a new game mode, created a much more fun quality change to the game that I was really itching for. It would have been nice if there was a new ending to experience, similar to how Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty expansion did theirs. Both games are similar to how their story and DLC is structured, and it would have fit nicely for FF16's ending, especially how it was very open-ended. To me, it would have made sense to have a new ending, considering that there is new lore added from its DLCs that is significant to the main story's ending or for its Act 3. Overall, I believe it's still a solid DLC. I was a bit sad that it ended so soon, considering how there was so many new things that I've unlocked and wanted to use. Also, I was really enjoying how the enemy designs were in fights. It just seemed like this DLC was a short-lived experience, especially how you cannot use any of your new gear in Kiros Gate either. One of the biggest criticisms I had when completing the base game is that the game lacks the gameplay loop and creates a system where your rewards don't really matter, since it will be given to you as long as you progress the mainline questlines. It was already stated right before the game launched. Yoshi P mentioned that they decided not to make the player feel inclined to grind out their gear, since a lot of players tend to quit or not engage as much with the content when players are forced to level themselves with the appropriate gear when they are trying to progress the game. As much as I do agree with Yoshi P, another problem with this direction is that the gameplay can end up too linear, where the game can feel stale at times since there are no other activities to engage in other than its story. I do think it is a solid DLC because of the quality it has shown for the map and gameplay. The boss fights were incredible, especially fighting against Leviathan. That was the biggest highlight amongst the whole game itself, so this DLC has good strengths, but it does have some weaknesses which have carried over from the base game. I would say this is worth getting if you really enjoyed Final Fantasy 16 and just want an excuse to play the game again, by all means. If you were to ask me if it's worth it to immediately purchase and play, I wouldn't be so confident on saying yes, considering how this DLC expansion can be short-lived. So if you're not in a rush to play, just get it for sale whenever that happens. I do want to say this before I leave, is that CBU3 has done a great job creating this game along with its DLC. The experience and improvements show a lot of great effort by the team for its DLC compared to the base game, and as I stated before, I just wanted to see much more of it. I hope there can be a FF16 Part 2, or they somehow create another action FF title in the future, because they know how to make great gameplay combat along with good overworlds to be in. They sure know how to give riveting story moments on top of all that. Their talent and skill is something we have to see more in the AAA atmosphere, because in the end, FF16 has a lot of great moments that most games don't have. And this wraps up for today's video. Remember, drop a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love to hear your guys' opinions so far with the Rising Tide, and let me know if you have completed it already, and give me your full thoughts and impressions of this DLC. I would love to hear you out, especially if you do agree or not with what I said in this video. I have some strong opinions of FF16, but in the end, I love the game, and I love its gameplay as well. I was pretty satisfied with what I got, but again, I would love to see more of it. I would love to see more of it, especially from this team. They know what they're doing. I just want to see more of them as well. But anyway, remember, drop a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Keep up to date with the channel. Hit the notification bell, especially how we cover a lot of variety of gameplay. So I hope to see y'all in the future. Peace off and have a good day.